Сочи приступила к производству компьютеров «Персональный спутник».
Boom! Gosh, I think I got on here with minimal technical difficulties. Oh boy, cross my fingers right now. I do believe I'm live. Let me know if you can hear me. I appreciate everybody that's here. This is going to be a different one, y'all. I got a bunch of material to go over this time, so I'm going to try to get through this with some sort of efficiency. And normally I put like little sketch notes. This time I've got just, oh man, so it's a crap of them. So anyway, let me check in with everybody real quick. Make sure everybody can hear me and that I am registering somehow. Let's see. Go to the top. Beth, thank you for being here. Glad you can make it, Beth. I always appreciate your support. We've been hanging for a while. Kyle Smith, what's up, brother? Thank you for being here. Kyle, I've been a major supporter for quite some time now. Jessica, what's up? I know you're traveling, so thank you for being here. Appreciate it. I was actually going to have Jessica on, but she's in a travel mode right now. But I'll be referencing you quite a few times, Jessica, because I think something that will come up either at the beginning or the ending will be the Amico alien and also the alien autopsy, both of which were blind targets for you that I had given to you before. So I think that'll be a very interesting one as well. Let's see. Boom. All right. Jonaside, thank you for being here. Good to see you, my friend. Paul, thank you for being here. Very cool. Very cool. Thanks for that, Jessica. Auntie Erin, what's happening? How you doing, Erin? Good to see you. Oh, whoa. The Sober Carper. Thank you for being here. Sober Carper. I always get that name. I get tongue twisted for some reason. Verse, how you doing? Thank you for being here. Right on, right on. Love when I see some fairly new names show up. That's always cool, man. Always cool. It's about the chat mostly. Goob5568 GOB. I never can say a lot of these names right, so I apologize, y'all. But thank you for being here. Lemon Jim, thank you for coming. Right on, right on. This will be an interesting show. Boom, right. Welcome, my friend. Jonaside, thank you. Yeah, that always helps. PTSD still to this day. You know how it is. I try not to tell the too much, you know. Right on. So check this out. Okay. So this is going to be interesting. What actually spurred this is interesting, and I think it's worthy. All right. One thing that you all that know me know that I like for a basis of what I'm researching or what I'm finding or what I'm dealing with my experiences, especially, I try to put some science in there as a foundation. Okay. I believe it's a good foundation to really start, you know, at least getting some facts. Does science explain everything? No. But some things it does at least serve as a good foundation and building blocks for whatever we might be experiencing that's paranormal, spiritual. So I like involving science, because a lot of the stuff that we hear, let's face it, y'all, these subjects, we have to use so much discernment, because one, you've got individuals that are attracted to these fields that are, one, mentally unstable and delusional, okay? Two, that are sometimes just plain liars. Three, those that are seeking fame and fortune and just making stuff up, okay? And between those three, and then you've got the real people, those that are 100. And it's hard to discern those amongst all the other crap that is attracted like moth to flame when it comes to these subjects. Okay, so I like a little bit of science. Now, what brings us here to this today, this topic of the gray, the anatomy of a gray, it's interesting. I'm going to post this again here. I put it up a couple of times already. It's this article thing on Reddit. Okay, and it's 3 years old. I had not heard of it. And the person that I heard it from was actually, I come across that cat that does Area 52. I'll try to link that later. He was talking about it. It's been a year and something ago there. And so I looked it up, because what he was saying, and he went through and kind of read the whole article. And I could do that, but to me, that's kind of superfluous. All right, me reading that whole article, opposed to, I'll just go through and tell you the things that stuck out to me like a sore thumb, and the things I can understand. And what this article is, y'all, is supposedly, okay, from a microbiologist, PhD level microbiologist. And they said that they had been in a lab where they worked on one of these genetics on one of these grays. Well, I mean, they didn't call it that. They actually called it, what is it? A exobiospheric organism, an EBO. Okay. Now, when I started reading some automatic, y'all know that know me a little on here. Y'all know I'm a hard sell on a lot of stuff. All right. I'm very skeptical of things, and I'm somebody that's experienced a lot. That's one reason. And a lot of the stuff that we're told is just bull. It's crap. And it's the same stuff recycled again and again and again. If I hear many more of these people with these huge platforms saying the same stuff that I heard back in the 80s, just kind of packaged a little bit more, throwing a couple of words on it. The quantum helix, the helix of your quantum DNA is upgrading because it's becoming fractal resonation with your intent of will. That sounds great, doesn't it? And I wasn't saying crap, man. That was some BS I was saying. Just like half of these people, but it sounds intelligent. Okay? Anyway, so I'm not going to get on one of my tangents about that and about the fakeism that I see going on in these communities. I'm going to stay off that. I'm not going to talk about how these people pretending to be contactees and making huge claims, you get around them, they don't have that energy at all. Why not? Some that claim to be psychic, they don't tell you nothing, and you get around them, you see that they're really not. Some are, but a lot aren't. And that is a big turnoff to me, all right? And I think that's probably why I don't get invited to conferences anymore, because I've been open about it. I don't like how narratives are being constructed in these fields. I think it's crap. But it's stuff like we're going to talk about right here in that article that I think is worthy, in terms of we've heard things about these grays and all these different things. And look, let me start this putting this off by telling you, okay, that I am not an expert on grays. I have had many experiences. None of them have been with grays. I've not seen grays on ships or nothing of that event. The closest thing I've seen to a gray was the Andromedan that I showed you, the little blue cats, but they weren't grays. And I'll tell you something else. I didn't smell ammonia coming off them. All those ships smell kind of like, to me, like Windex, like the ones I've been on board. But I don't necessarily smell that coming off the beings. It's like it's coming off the environment itself. And I think I've talked about how I think that's a disinfectant agent also, amongst other things, when you've got somebody like us that emits a microcloud around us, a microbiome around us, okay, that leaves DNA and all sorts of other things that we live constantly around you, is very hazardous for us, some other beings. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What we're going to do first, all right, is just, I think we should start by going over the types of grays that I'm aware of. Okay. Now, like I said, I'm not an expert on these grays, not experienced them, so I'm not trying to come off like that. There's a lot of people that can put a lot more in this than me. Okay. But at least it gives us, again, a foundation, and it's worthy of looking at this information that was presenting in that article. It's quite interesting, actually, several things. And I'll try to tell you what I know of it, what I can make out scientifically, okay, and put it into hopefully words that anyone can understand. I hope. I may not, but I don't know. Or I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. That's always true. Anyway, always a chance. Anyway, let's go to the type of grays that they are. I just thought this was a cool representation, and the ones that I'm aware of, okay? You've got the grays that are supposed to be from Zeta Reticuli, like Barney Hill and them saw, okay? And that seems to be a lot of standard, the smaller ones. Then you've got the taller ones that they call Ebens. And I've seen some representations that look similar to the one in the middle low, but I think they look a little different than that too. And the Ebens are supposedly a higher intelligent. They're the taller grays, and the ones that often look a little bit older is what I'm told. All right, so you've got them, and then you've also got those that are supposedly from our future or from our past. You know, you've got that that book by Michael guy. He talks all about the grays in the future. He's a newer guy. I'll look it up. I've got his book. I've not read it, but I've got it marked. I'll look it up later. Anyway, it's he's talking all about the grays from the future, supposedly, and those that Credo mentions. That Credo Mutua also mentions those type of grays that come from our future and are the result of some sort of a cataclysm, and they're coming back in time. They're time travelers of that degree. So you've got those types of grays that I'm aware of. All right. Again, the Zeta ones, the ones that are called Ebens, and then the ones that are supposed to be from our own future. And I'm sure there's a lot more types than just that, but those are the ones I think we'll just kind of stick to in general. All right. And I always thought the one in the middle is interesting. You know, I've not actually met Whitley Strieber. I interacted with him on a workshop that he had done with Alexis Brooks, and I had to see how the workshops were going to be structured because I was supposed to do the next one, and I did. It went very well, actually. But I had not met him before that, or at least interacted with him. So I did a little bit on that workshop, but not really dealt with him very much. And I know he's kind of an expert on gray interactions, so he could probably go. I'm sure he goes way deeper in this, in Communion and all those other books. And some of the stories he was telling us during the workshop was actually quite interesting, you know, for somebody who's had constant interaction with these beings. Anyway, so just the types of grays is just what I want to go under. I feel like I'm missing one too. That's one thing I didn't write down. The ones that's called Time Traveler from Our Future, the Ebens, and then also the taller ones and then the shorter ones. I guess there's like two classifications of them. So we'll go on. I've got a few pictures to show this time, and then I'll go over the information from that article that really stuck out to me. All right. One of the things, let's see. And they start doing audios too soon, so that'll be a new experience. All right, moving forward. This is something I wanted to show, and this is something that I actually went over in a couple of my videos, okay? This is from the free CCRI survey, all right? And this is the short gray. This is what happened when you encounter them. I was, again, somewhat shocked to see that much of the positive on there. That's almost the majority of the chart. You've got a lot of unexplained, and Ray had told me something about there was I'm not sure, explained that a lot of people were very fearful of just the experience itself and seeing them and scared. Not to the degree that it was mentioned with reptilian, but I think fear kicks in a lot, you know, and mixed experience too. Were you hurt? Were you examined, or whatever might have went on? Anyway, it's just an interesting chart, you know. Again, not quite what we would expect to see. I would expect it to be more skewed towards the negative. And that's on the short grays, the 3 to 4 feet tall. see. All right, this one. There you go. This one, the tall grays. And I've heard of two different types mentioned. That is, and we'll go over that actually too. The tall grays, I've heard the ones that are supposedly ebens, and then but I've heard of like two different types of quote unquote ebens that are grays. Anyway, 5 to 9 feet tall. A lot of people skipped this one. Interesting, I had to skip it. I've not encountered these beings. So, but out of those that answered, very interesting. Again, a large amount of positive, large amount of not sure, neutral. Just very interesting, Again, not what I would fully expect to see, because all I've always associated with grays is negative for the most part. I'm sorry, it just is. As Credo calls them, Mentingding, Mantinade, Mendingding, or Mendinga, however he says it. But the torture of people, torture of men, and that's to the experiments that they're doing. And I agree with what he says. It seems like they're harvesting us, and like they're farmers, you know what I mean? Eloping farmers to a degree, that, the same way we deal with the cows. But I'll tell you, if the situation is going on now, that all of a sudden our chickens and cows started becoming self-aware and aware of their situation, we would have one heck of a problem on our hands, especially how we choose to interact with those species. So that may be something that's going on here with this shift. You know what I'm saying? Let's see, insight on that one. I'll probably hit one or two more of these pictures. Okay, concerning the ebens, I've heard two different types. Okay, and we'll start with the one that is there was when I had first heard Betty Hill describing her experience. I mean, this is going back to like when I was a kid, when I first heard her talking about her actual experience. When she described these Zeta Reticulans, she described the leader as being slightly different, as him having a big nose. And she complained, she compared his nose to that comedian, that old comedian, Jimmy Durante. And Jimmy Durante, they used to call him the schnoz because he had his big old nose. Okay. And then you start finding out, though, when you start looking at quote unquote these ebens, these supposedly higher grades that are more involved with the creation of those that are biodroids or whatever they are. All right. Some of them are described as having these bigger noses. The ones at Air Force, was it the Air Force Base? Hellemans Air Force Base. They were described as having these noses, long noses, and they usually have on this headdress. Okay. So I think that it's very interesting when start looking at that as being this other type of gray that is quote unquote these ebens. And this is one of the illustrations I've seen of them. And this goes back to what they call Shamash too, from those ancient texts. He had a rope headdress and a nose like that. But this is what I've heard described as an eben. Okay, with these very large Jimmy Durante noses. And I just really find that interesting, and the headdress too. And we hear about many of these beings that during abductions are seen wearing these hats. Okay, now keeping that in mind, I have seen another description of ebens also that are supposed to be the higher intelligence when it comes to these grays. I don't believe that they actually are. I don't think they're the prime intelligence, and I think we still have yet to see who the prime intelligence is that's designing all this. But nonetheless, here's the other illustration I've seen of supposed ebens. I was told that they're not seen as much on the craft, and that they seem to be in control of the grays, the mantids, all that stuff. I've heard mantids being high up too, but these things too looking similar to that. I have not encountered a being that looks like this either. So I can't, be of any service to you on that. But nonetheless, it's very interesting when we talk about what be quote unquote the higher classifications of grays, because I'm interested in the prime intelligence. I do believe I've got one more that's a supposed Ebian that was of that nature. Here it is. And we're going to go over this article and the things that really stuck out to me in that. All right. That was on Earth Files. Linda Moulton Allen and showed that and said that that was one of the Ebens that she thought was prime intelligence. I heard that before, so I find it interesting when you see these correlations. That's supposed to be one. It looks somewhat similar to the other one picture, but I mean, nonetheless, it kind of reminds me of that thing they say that Aleister Crowley was channeling or whatever. And that thing looks kind of like that to me. I could be wrong. I'm not I'm not an expert on grays. I'm not an expert on the demonic thing. I just try to stay aware of it. Know what I'm saying? Anyway, one other. Okay, this is kind of corny to show it, but I've seen this illustration pop up several times too. And this one is supposedly from, I believe, from Sirius. Or no, from Orion. I'm sorry, supposed to be one of those Orion beings of some type, archeloid or something like that. Not the insectoid, but the other ones. I just noticed they have the noses too, and that looks like more of this. Again, another one of these suits. I'm just going to be honest with y'all, folks. I don't care for the area of space that they call Orion. I know there's stargates there, but I know it's very warlike around there. And the people that I've interacted with in the community that claim to be from there, they're very not hospitable. They're really not really likable people, to be honest with you. So that's just how I feel. But I think Orion, there's a lot of war going on out there over those gates there, stargates, just like there is in certain parts of the earth. I think that's what's going on in the Middle East a lot. They're warring over those gates. So it's just stuff like that. I don't vibe with that. You know what I'm saying? But to each that does, I'm sure there's other species there, but it's just not really my thing. Here, real quick, when it comes to the headdress that I mentioned and that particular type of Eben and how they probably apparently can walk around on our planet, but I think they're still having some suits. There's technology with these headdresses and these things they're holding. But that right there is Shamash with the headdress. See, his nose doesn't look super large, but he's got that headdress and he's holding symbols. So I think it's just when we start looking at fixtures in history and something else, he's supposed to be a giant. I do believe he was a giant. So just again, that's me looking for references. So don't hate on the bee. Anyway, all right, let's stop there, and we'll start going on with. Okay, well, actually, I'll bring that up later as we go through things. Okay, catch up with chat just a little bit here. Miss Catherine, what's happening? How you doing? I made a reference to you and Charlie, actually, a nice lady that is probably going to be a new client. She was looking at the John Mack Institute, and I think she come across the EOC Experiences of Colors, but I kind of gave her Charlie's email, so hopefully she'll hook up with you and everything. So good to see you here. Thank you for being here. And my pleasure. Anything I could do to help. Okay. So going back to that article. All right. Like I said, I'll link it again right here. And what I'm going to do is just point out some things about it. Everybody else can go back and reread it. I'm not going to reread the whole thing. It's just somewhat, I think, superfluous when somebody else has done it. And it gets boring. Me sitting up reading it. not that long of an article, but it's informative. All right. And it starts off with the gentleman talking about like where they were from, what they got their science in, how they met the people that got them in the lab, all the security protocols, then saying, oh, by the way, I'm gonna give you some red herrings when it comes to stuff about me, so you can't find out who I am. And that just to me is like, look, I don't care about that stuff. I'm more interested in the straight science and the stuff he quoted there. Okay, I had a friend of mine look at some of this that has to do with that knows genetics, and they're not into this stuff, but they say, man, they go, Littleton's one of your deals there. Whoever wrote that, they have a good knowledge of real geneticists, genetic microbiology. What they're saying is advanced enough that it's not a joke. So can I say it's real? No, they look at me go, this stuff you come up with, hey, it's not me. This is just what goes around. Anyway, so the individual had broken up into three basic areas, which is genetics, anatomy, and biological systems. All right. Again, they were referring to them as, I don't know if it's a female or male that wrote that re-edit. It wasn't easy to find it. I had to go research it, and finally I popped it up. Exobiospheric organisms, which is EBOs, okay, and that they look similar to like what we call grays, and they're actually eukaryotes, and their home biosphere must have a common ancestry with Earth here. Okay, so that's interesting when going back to the formation of planets themselves, whether they being constructed artificially, as Jacques Doubleday says, or naturally, that there's some sort of a commonality between our biosphere and theirs, which I think leads to some of the genetic compatibility that they talk about later. All right. They mentioned that there it is right there again. Compatible with human cellular machinery, meaning you can like inject cells into either or, and they describe that on there, which is quite interesting. Okay. They have a highly condensed genome that's much smaller than ours, and the uniformity of gene sequences is a strong indication of artificial refinement. So that there is actually showing you, and this is, I got the impression this individual is talking about gene guns and stuff like that. To my knowledge, those came out in the late 90s, and they made a quote of things that technology in the late 90s that came forward concerning genetics that allowed some of these breakthroughs to be done on these EBOs. Okay. Some genes correspond directly with known human genes and animal genes. And I'm curious, I would imagine the cow is one of them. Okay, these animal genes that these things are having. And then it says on some of these animal genetics, there's no sign of genetic refinement, but it was more of a crude type of copying and pasting method. That's what they're referring to when it comes to the animal part. Okay. And what we're describing here, they're describing chimeras, which Jessica and I talk about all the time, but just from a different place. And they had mentioned that how these were disposable beings. Okay, going forward, sorry. They also had many genes. They found many genes that aren't present in our biosphere. And that's one of the main reasons for this project this person was working on, was the exploration of those genes that are not from our biosphere. And then they start mentioning that there was another team that must have found an EBO cell line, which is exobiospheric organism cell line that they call EPI-G11. And what's interesting about that caught my attention on there, it says it enters a phase of exponential growth when exposed to BVS, which is fetal, or FBS, which is fetal bovine serum. Gonna mention that again, okay? This EBO cell line EP1 G11 or EPI-G11 enters a phase of exponential growth when exposed to fetal bovine serum. That's cow. That's cow. Does this take us into what's going on with some of these mutilations? And more than that, I'm going to stop on that and take a step forward. And I hope Jessica is still with us. This is one of the things I was going to talk to her about, okay, is that when dealing with that, it takes us into this. Oh, so I've started to get excited, and my motor dexterity is getting wild because I'm getting too excited. Brother's getting nervous, you see. Anyway, it takes us into this, okay, which is a blind target that I gave her, the 1988 Aviation Weekly Amico advertisement for that magazine. And this is this is one that I had first saw William Cooper talking about it. And he had said that he believed this was a real creature. And when they tried to research it and things like what was it actually, the magazine said, oh, it was a prop. And he started getting like, oh, it was a 6 foot tall prop. Oh, no, it was a little prop, but it was never produced. Okay. And when you start getting like in some of their images of this, Cooper had zoomed in on the forehead. And I've got a better, closer shot, but it's distorted. It looks like it's from the magazine. It was kind of bent up. But when you get close on it, you notice these fine hairs on the head, very fine, sporadic kind of hairs that almost looks like baby hairs. Okay. And this thing to me looks sad. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when it comes to this EBO cell line of EPIG11, okay, that enters the phase of exponential growth when exposed to fetal bovine serum, look at the eyes of this thing. Those look like cow eyes to me. So is this an experiment that we're looking at right here? That's an Earth human ultra-terrestrial or crypto-terrestrial experiment? Anyway, Jessica's data might confirm or deny some of this. But what we're hearing right here, I'm looking for answers, and I think this is one right here. I've always wondered what's going on with the cow. And when it starts coming to like cow eyes and human eyes, they're got some compatibility, some similarities. Okay, they're not exactly the same, but it's fascinating. You would never think that. But when dealing with that right here, what this individual is saying. Now, look, like I said, I'm not a scientist, so a lot of the stuff and that what they're talking about there, genetic research, goes a little bit beyond me. But it's still interesting, and it's I think good for any real scientist to look at and not just throw the baby out with the bathwater. So is that something they've grown in the lab here that was being contained? A real chimera, however you say that word. Let me see. I'm going to see how this one looks. It might be too distorted to. I'll show it to you anyway. Why not? We'll stay on it long. It's not as good. I can tell it looks like a direct pick from the magazine. It looks, and that's an old magazine, so but that's more of a close-up of it. And I think it looks even more sad in that one. But I was trying to get in the forehead and along the neck. It's got these little hairs, but you still can't see it even at that distance. So, no, not even that distance. Anyway. Okay. Anything else on that I wanted to bring up? No. Okay. That's the main thing. Okay. Okay. Now going forward. Okay. Next, skin biosynthetic film. They on their skin, they on their cover, they're saying this individual says they have a biosynthetic film that been when removed smells like burnt hair and ammonia. Okay, so that is different. And by the way, I'm aware that the cow and the human eye are not exactly compatible, but there's similarities when you look them up. The rods and cones are not identical, no, but they're compatible in a way that can be looked up. I'm not just talking off my off my off my rocker. I do look things up. Anyway, okay, this biosynthetic skin, it smells a lot like burnt hair and ammonia. And this individual described that when the skin is removed, it has like a white texture to it. And something else very interesting, when it comes to like the bovine and other things, they described some of this manipulation being done at the zygote stage. Now, there's something about my experiences I've not talked about publicly because it involves somebody else, but I have been involved with something that I wouldn't quite call it a hybrid project, all right, but there's something going on there. And when dealing with this, it was quoted to me, they were showing me what was done during the zygote stage of a fetus. And I don't think it's coincidence that they're using that word there, okay? Anyway, we'll go off there. The people on my Patreon know what I'm talking about. I've only talked about it there. Anyway, I'm gonna put a couple of videos up. That's because it implies somebody else, and I said I would never do that. So I'm trying to honor that. God knows. Anyway, next up, all right. Genetic polymorphisms could be sequenced for a specific task. So basically, what they're saying is the genes are so much smaller when the chromosomes are different. They're more compact and smaller, but these polymorphisms could be used basically to make certain strains of people they may look the same. An individual saying that they couldn't quote it because they only saw that specimen or whatever, but that there are others that probably that could be due for, like, one could be genetically engineered to be a pilot, one genetically engineered to be, an office manager or whatever, another one to be a worker bee, almost like an insect colony, or the way those were programmed in a way. I think that's really fascinating to look at that. All right. That again, genetic refinement. I find it really fascinating. And what they're talking about, what kind of instruments could possibly do that they don't have any access to at that point. I think that's really where it's at, and that type of technology, where we're going now. All right, here's something that really caught my attention. In fact, let me set this up before I get going too much here. Oh Lord. Which one are we going to show? This is an illustration from that Army radio guy named CJ. Was it Jeremy CJ Weeks? Okay, I'm bringing this out because one thing that says on there, when it talks about the eye, and it says that the eye lens can be removed, and underneath is a human eye that's about 3 times the size, a circular eye that's about 3 times the size of a human eye. Okay, and they described it being like a pale colored, like a pale gray color, but it was a human eye 3 times the size. Now this guy, Jeremy CJ Weeks, he talked about being in an abduction scenario, and one of these grays popped the lens out of its eye. Said it popped it out like you would pop out the lens out of a sunglasses. And underneath it had this huge blue eye that was like 3 times the size of a human eye. And I find that an amazing coincidence. And even more to the point on that, all right. a better one here. When dealing with this, and I think when we start dealing with the clone factor of what I've heard so much about, look, I know some people get mad at me. You sound like a racist. No, I'm not a racist. I'm telling you what I've read, okay? When it comes to what we're just saturated with all the time, which is the tall whites, the tall whites. They're always described as having extremely blue eyes. In every account I've read, they're always described as that. Whether they be the Pleiadian whites or Nordics or whatever, they've always got these blue eyes. And when we start dealing with cloning and genetic and stuff like that, I don't think it's a coincidence. We're seeing this here. Why didn't this one have a pale eye like this other guy or this individual's describing? Is it because it's just a different type of gray, or we're dealing with different genetics as far as, I think it's really worthy. And how do they connect to the quote unquote tall whites with the blue eyes? The piercingly blue eyes that look almost not human. Read it many, many times, heard it many times, talked to people that have encountered these beings. All right. So I, of course, think that we're not being told about, of course, the last time you heard about the tall blacks, never. But, but we hear about this a lot. And so I'm just factoring this in because I've been said that, you only worried about melanin dominant ETs. No, that's not true. I'm willing to look at everything. All right. But I'm trying to figure this out. I just don't like how the field is skewed. And I'll tell you, when you start dealing with a prime intelligence that is making this and making the tall whites, how do you know they're not the tall blacks doing it? And it's not a racial problem we see on this planet that's gone on galactically. We don't really know where that begins and ends. I'm just keeping it 100. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but this is stuff that needs to be brought up. Okay? Believe me, I've taken so much heat for that. No one wants to even talk about this stuff. That doesn't belong in the contact scenario. Are you kidding me? Look at the stuff we see in the media. It's a big deal, okay? And that's starting to change right now. And it needs to change a lot more. Who is the prime intelligence? Are the prime intelligence from melanin? Are they from dark energy, dark matter? We'd really think about that. Just because something comes from dark matter doesn't mean it's evil. Anyway, all right. Going on as I digress again. Okay, anyway, just the coincidence between what that individual's saying and what Weeks was saying, I think is just very interesting. Something else, okay, on that report they say they have no teeth, no tongue, and they would estimate by the eyes, the way those eyes look, that they have excellent night vision. And then, of course, that those lenses are made to really protect the eye, along with the biofilm that's around them. I personally think that those lenses are probably more like something like Street Hawks. You remember that show, his visor, getting all that information, or what is it? Or even maybe the way the Terminator would get the information, the readout. I wonder if those goggles aren't more like that also. They're a data retrieval system also. I could be wrong, just food for thought, okay? Eye-colored pale gray over large black people. We talked about that. Okay. The brain. It describes there as the brain having 4 major sections connected to a central lobe. And I didn't fully understand because I call that a tetra. There's a name for it. It's on there. But when you look that up, actually, it's supposed to be like a 4 separated brain. Like we have 4 hemispheres of our brain, but they're not lobes. And I'm trying to understand if they were describing a 4-lobed brain. And the reason why I'm bringing that up, and I found it interesting, okay, in this old book here, the Uranta book, they talk about on page, On page 566, they talk about the brain type series of inhabited worlds. And they break it down. This one, I wanted to see if they talked about a 4-phase brain. They don't, though. They talk about 1-type brain, 2-type brain, and 3-type brain. And that Urantians, as in Earth people, humanity, has the 2-hemisphere brain, which to me is more, I think they're talking the corpus callosum and the left and right side of the brain. All right. But they talk about these beings that are actually have 3 brain system are much more advanced than us, and how we look completely, our society looks inferior compared to theirs in many ways, especially artistically, and we're connected to spirit is involved and joining with spirit. We're very far behind. But anyway, so they never said 4-brained in this, but I just wanted to see, okay? And that's just interesting information, stuff to just kind of, I'm always looking for similarities and stuff. Anyway, moving right along. Okay, this one super caught my attention. It's on the brain section of that article. I'm posting it again right here just because I can. So everybody will have it and can mark it. And I'll try to remember to put it on the thing after the video's over. Okay. Oh gosh, sorry, I totally fell off on. I'll get to everybody in chat when I was trying to say somewhat caught up. Phoenix, thank you for being here. Mr. Honor, thank you for being here. Okay, this one really caught my attention on that. And this is where, when looking for information, I think it's imperative, okay? It says on there are nodules on the central lobe that appear to be biological circuitry for technology interaction, with connecting with their technology. So that's that symbiotic things. And you see, I've heard before people mention that they fly these ships, where they're SSP or something, they get on board these ships, they're flying these ships, and they can't always control them. Okay, and that they can't stay, because once they lose focus, they lose control of the ship. And I think it's because we don't have these nodules in our central lobe. Look that up. I'm not a brain scientist, okay, but you can look it up. The human brain has no nodules in its central lobe. So that's something that they're saying looks definitely bioengineered refinement. And we start getting into what I've talked about a lot, which is in like the bioneural circuitry of these craft that are living organisms. That starts tying us into that. Anyway, I think even on Star Trek, the Voyager, it had what they call bioneural circuitry, these gel packs. Little different, but I think they were on the right course. But that's neither here nor there. These beings have no vocal cords, no anus, no genitals, and no nipples. Fascinating, because that takes us into what they call excreto pseudofurious systems, which is actually that they don't have their waste production comes out of these mini pores that they're saying when they talk about their skin, and that's how they secrete actually their poop and their urine and things, as they have no urethra, no anus, but it comes out of these pores, and that's how it processes. And they say that it produces a very high ammonia and sulfur smell, and you hear about those beings smelling like that all the time, really, really potent wise, and that they actually sweat ammonia. Okay, so that's fascinating. Between that and underneath their skin, they smell like burnt hair. Underneath the biofilm, they smell like burnt hair and ammonia also. Very, very interesting. This individual described them as being like a whitish color underneath the biofilm and the suit. Now, taking this and cross-referencing this with Credo Mutua talking about how some of these grays would be trapped in the bush and the Sangomas would eat them. And they had a type of wood that could break through that suit. and that inside they look like this pink fleshy stuff, and that they were prepare and eat these things, and it takes them through a type of thing that's even more intense than ayahuasca. It's like you get super sick, deathly sick, and if you don't die in the first 24 hours or whatever, then you go through this other thing, this euphoria, this spiritual euphoria. Anyway, so I just find it interesting, like I said, when comparing things. All right. Okay. One other thing, their lungs process air more similar to the way a bird does, as opposed to human, more characteristics of like bird type of lungs. Another interesting little point. All right. He described in that article that their hands are 4 digits with no nails. Okay. Now, something I want to bring up, a few things. And I find this interesting when looking at what would be these different types. I have had this for quite a while. And this supposedly is EBE hand, you can see up there. That's got the 4 digits. But they said that these beings have like an opposing thumb. But what's interesting about this representation is it's got those claws on it. And if you listen to what Credo Mutwa said about his abduction, some people don't like it that I reference him, but we don't hear a lot of stuff that comes out of Africa when it comes to Sangoma and shaman type of information. Everybody talks to Native Americans. They talk about all these other people, but they don't really talk about the black people or the Africans. And I think that's disrespectful. I think it's racist, and it needs to be exposed more. And he finally got somebody that was talking, and he was saying he was getting in trouble for it. People disagreed for him talking, but it was a time to not keep this stuff secret. Anyway, what interests me was Credo, and I've heard other contactees or abductees is a word for them, saying that these grays had claws. They had claws. Sometimes I hear webbed fingers, but I've heard claws more than once. And it seems to kind of scare people a little bit. Now, taking that and cross-referencing it in only the way that your weird friend, the B-Dub, can do, I want to throw this out there. Since we're talking about the different types of these gray beings, this is supposedly an illustration of J-Rod that said he was, when they put him in a human shirt, and he said he was from the future at a time when there'd be a major cataclysm on Earth and that humans would be forced to go underground. And after generations, they would grow insectoid features, and that's what he represented from the future. But if you notice his hand, he's been represented, out of the pictures I've seen of him, as having a clawed hand like that. So is that the type of gray that has the claw? And whatever we're seeing on that other deal does not in this, whatever this being, this microbiologist was analyzing. And I've said this before, when dealing with J-Rod and this whole story, it also takes us into the ant people and what the Hopi and other people said about the ant people, that they went underground. There were humans that went underground during the cataclysm that actually correlates to what Randall Carlson has talked about as far as the Taurus Perseid meteor shower and how many actually meteors hit us in about a 2,000 year frame that ended the ice age. Not began it, but ended it. So, I mean, and they found those holes that he's talking, the impact craters that he's talking about. So that's not just hypothesis so much. So anyway, so that makes you wonder. So, you know, you've got creatures from the future saying that, creatures from the past. I guess it's like Doctor Who says, timey-wimey, you know, I mean, I don't know, but it takes us into that part of these type of grays that might be from our future. And let me see here. As a matter of fact, golly, I should know that guy's name. Let me pull it up real quick. I should know. It's Michael. I'm going to say Michael Priestess, but that's not his name. And I've not actually read his book, but I've heard some of his theories, and they're really good. Michael Masters, extra temporal model. Okay, it's a book he wrote too. It's a model, but it's a Michael Masters is his name. And really, what he's kind of doing is taking a lot of stuff. What I'd heard of it, you know, what I could make of it. He was actually taking. Let's close that entire window. He was taking things that we've heard, like from Credo and other people, and putting kind of the time science with it. So that's interesting. You know what I mean? But anyway, that's what he's saying, is that a large majority of these beings we're dealing with are not just crypto-terrestrials and ultra-terrestrials, but they're from our past and our future, and they're time manipulators that share this planet with us. So it goes along with Mac Toonies and some others. All right. Anyway, just I want to bring that up when it comes to maybe identifying some of these different types of grays. Is this claw hand as opposed to the ones that this individual was describing? Oh, based on everything that they're saying, the only way that they think that these grays can consume are these these exobiospheric organisms can consume food is through a liquid diet, and that they would need a high sugar, high whatever liquid, and that's how they. And that's, you know, again, that's kind of interesting, you know. And why do they have those pot bellies? All the grays are desirable. Why do they put that into their genetic design? It's not desirable, my personal opinion from personal experience. Okay. You know, that's a lot of it. One other thing, okay, and something else I wanted Jessica to talk about is data-wise, and that is so another blind target I gave her, okay, and I don't want to take a bunch of arrows for this because I did last time. The infamous Roswell, not Roswell, but it's supposed to be from a crash deal. It was the alien autopsy that came on in the late 90s with Jonathan Frakes, Commander Riker, or Commander Rekirk. Anyway, no, sorry. Commander Riker, he did that. And this thing was a big deal, okay? Then it just went away, and you had these people, Ray Santelli and other people that, I think Ray Santelli's the one that sent it in. So they're all saying, oh, it was a prop. And I've done 2 videos on this. Jessica and I did a show on it. All right. And I'll tell you what they showed us after supposedly the doll that they use with the lamb insides and all this elaborate stuff. It took, first of all, it took like 2 decades for the people to come forward with this, with the prop. And when you look at it, it didn't look like this. I mean, it looked generally like this, but it looked fake. Now, the ones that they're showing now look more like this because they've advanced the technology. But the stuff they were showing back then, oh, it was this. It didn't even look like that. And I've talked to, quote unquote, one of these whistleblowers that was in the military. They claimed to me that they thought that this original one that showed was real and that they had seen other autopsies done. Okay? But when coming down to this being, okay, and that's the reason why it changed. They just try to use different information when something's been put right in front of us. And Jessica's data somewhat actually confirmed that. Now, that picture, that thing had a black lens on it. And if you've seen the autopsy, okay, they actually remove that black lens from its eye. And underneath, this is what they had showed. I tried to find a good picture of it. Once the eyes were removed. Now, I could be wrong, but that looks like a very large pupil that's rolled up in this thing's eye. You can't see the black part of it, but just the top of it. But if you look at that, that would be a huge eye, wouldn't it? If that what you see at the top is not the lid there, but actually the pupil itself. And if you rolled that down, that would be a huge eye. And that's someone what's being described there. Now, this being there, its hand did not have claws, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I've got one of that. Maybe I don't. Because the hand was actually separated, but I believe it was not clawed, and it had polymorphism. Sorry. Don't throw sticks at me. Polydactyl. Okay, meaning that it had six digits, 6 toes and 6 fingers. So that's different too. And by the way, you know, Urfa Man from Göbekli Tepe, he had 6 digits also, polymorphism, or polydactyl, sorry. Oh, somebody's criticizing, that's polydactyl. Sorry. You know, if you look down in that article, that individual talks about there being like a different organ somewhere near, like above the stomach or something, that I can't remember what they called it. Sorry, I forgot to write it down, but it's in that article. And, you know, they had said that this thing had, this is close to this point of the video here, where they say it has an organ that they don't know what it did. An unknown organ. And it makes you wonder, is that what one of the regulation systems that this guy is talking about in the very end? In fact, let me see if I can just find it for you real quick. The very end, they're talking about muscular skeletal system. I want to say it's around the circulating system. Or maybe around abdomen. Anyway, you can find it on there, and it's a name for it. But I'm wondering if what they're actually showing you being removed during this autopsy around this time is that organ, this unknown organ they're talking about. Again, that's consuming that this is not fake. And I have reasons to believe it isn't, because what I saw to them try to discredit it looked faker than this. And it just didn't jive at all. If you look at the videos I've done over alien autopsy, I did 2 of them. One of them, I showed all the pictures of the individuals that supposedly had a model of this, and they were showing, oh, it was this thing right here, and we did this and that. It looked kind of convincing how they supposedly rigged it up to look like it was actually being dissected and all this other stuff. But it didn't really measure up. In fact, I'm going to see if I can't find it just on GP. Oh, here's 2. Okay. Here's the hand. I do have a picture of its hand. Let's see if it's clawed. Sorry, these are not pictures I had planned on sending, so I can't always pull them up as fast as the others. You think I'm slow on the other ones. The fact I could do it at all is a miracle. Okay, we can't really see. But you notice something that was different in the original footage, that is actually separated. You can see it there. It's not really attached. It's separated. And one of the ones they were showing to supposedly steal it was attached. When the original one, it was not. So I can't remember if it was clawed or not. That one doesn't really tell us. Sorry, that was a bomb down on that one, but I gave the good old college try. Here. Okay, the first one that they showed that was supposedly this thing did not look like this one. And this is the one I started seeing more later, that popped up later. It was not the one that they were initially showing back in the 90s. But now they're showing this one now. And that's a pretty good representation right there, you know? But that's something they had plenty of time to put together there. So, food for thought on that. But it's enough to discredit the whole thing there. But that's in the time from 90, whatever that was, 96 to now. You got plenty of time to put together a good one now. And it just discredits everything. To quote Redman, muddy waters, muddy waters. You know, that's and the best thing is to always, you know, squeeze a truth in between a couple of lies. Anyway, so that's most of it for that, folks. Again, comparing some of this to what Credo Muto was talking about, and Credo was the same as the gentleman with the oh gosh, I'm gonna say Michael Glass. I forgot his name that quick. Sorry. Anyway, Credo was talking that before that individual wrote that book, which was in 2022, I believe. But he's saying the same thing that Credo was, that some of these grays are from the future. Credo said two things. He said that these grays are from the future, but they were also the offspring of the Shatari, of the reptilians. And he didn't believe that we were being experimented on as much as harvested. So, I mean, it's, you know, you got all different perspectives and different types of these beings that are coming here. So it's not absolute. Like I said, I'm not an experiencer of grays, but I think looking into this stuff and doing research and real scientists looking at the genetic stuff this individual is talking about is very worthwhile. You know what I mean? Stuff like that, I think that article we should be dealing with more than some of these obscene tales we're hearing. People's tales of doing these things that are so unreal. You know what I mean? Everybody's got these superpowers, and I want to see anybody show me your superpowers. I just want to see it. You know what I mean? Move a bunch of stuff on you. Get on the deal. I want you to see. Just take a bowling ball and move it telepathically, move it psychokinetically with your powers. I want to see something like that. You know what I mean? And otherwise, it's just stuff that distracts us from real information like we just were dealing with here. Now I'm going to go down. Oh, I may have messed up the chat, y'all. Uh-oh, I may have messed up. Oh. Uh-oh. I may have messed up the chat, everybody. Oh, no. I can bring it back. Okay, I just got something. Okay. Oh, okay. Whew. Oh, man. Okay, I don't know how far off I am here. Greetings, Mr. Honor. Thank you for being here. Hopefully I didn't fly through that too quick. Greetings, Lori. How you doing? Hopefully that information come across all right, you know. Like I said, I'm not a geneticist, so I didn't waste time trying to break down all the stuff you said genetically. But it's stuff that somebody that's really into that, even basic genetics, probably could look up and know a lot more than me. So yeah. Thank you. It wasn't bad. A lot of stuff blowing up around here. A lot of stuff. Yeah, the sulfur smell of them. Yeah. And you know, that's something I always wondered, because I've never smelled that on any of the beings I've been around that are non-humans, but I have smelled something. But it wasn't ammonia. It smelled more like Windex on board the craft. You know what I mean? So it wasn't coming from the beings, but I think that's to sterilize the environment. That's something that took me really interested in stasis fields and the color stasis field that levitate people into a craft. You know, is it a blue one, purple one? Because I used to hear about the purple ones. The purple light was specifically a type of UV to disinfect us from once we get on board the craft. And I start hearing things that melanated contactees didn't go through that color of a light being taken in. So I want to know, like, where was the truth in that between our cultures? You know what I mean? And I found that it wasn't consistent. Like for me, for example, a blue beam pulled me in, or a golden beam that turned blue, or blue, turned purple. And I think the blue is maybe disinfected agent also, that light too. Something to kill the micro cloud around us. I think that's very dangerous if you get around beings that aren't from Earth, you know? Just like it shows in Color of the War of the Worlds, it's the bacteria that got them, right? Took them down. Catherine. Mm, mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, the ships that I've been on board, there have four components that they're made of. One is um, metals from planets that are devoid of atmospheres and Van Allen belts. They get bombarded by solar radiation from whatever spectrum that the star there is on in a way that is unknown to Earth metals. So that makes them, like, you know, they mine those. And then also there's a fungal component, a mycelium component. I've talked about that since 2014, and that's becoming just common talk now. You know how much I got dogged out for that in 2014 when I started saying that? All right. And another one is, okay, DNA from the crew. And then the last is a type of a quasi-crystal, photonic quasi-crystal compound. And all that is put together in that composite is grown around a mako, a black hole. But, you know, they can be micro black hole. So they don't have to be big, these things, but they're grown in space, the black holes in space. And for looking at that, look at things that they can do with glass that is bonded in space now, in zero and vacuum, like 0 and 0 point vacuum. It makes, like, the president's windshields is made of that glass that's bonded in space because it's super, super like a Knight Rider, molecular bond shell. It's like that. So anyway, when dealing with these beings, so I said before, we start thinking of things like a shipyard. Think about how you see mushrooms that will pop up in somebody's yard or outdoors. Obviously, there'll be a cluster of them, how they're connected by the mycelium. Think about that when you start thinking about the reproduction of a craft, a biological craft, a craft that several civilizations are coming together to help bring together consciously and manifest on top of the organic and the material life that's already present. A whole nother thing. And then you've got this engine, this brain complex that's temporally out of sync with the rest of the ship. It's dimensionally displaced, you know? So that way, that explains some of the way when some of this equipment, when I was around it physically, I started getting really dizzy, even more. That temporal aphasia, it's out of sync with us. You know what I mean? Another reason I think that the craft I've been on board, we can't survive very long. Don't think I could have anyway. So, you know, but of course, when they're bending time, you don't know how long you were truly there. Anyway, so anyway, neither here nor there, but that's great. Yeah, definitely. That's dealing again with bioneurological circuitry and life forms. And when dealing with mycelium and how it's connected as a nervous system and how it's possibly sentient, and they're seeing that now, how mycelium grows towards certain things. That's where it's at. And that's why I talk about symbiotic craft, organic craft that come here and go into the earth and go down into what's called the deep biosphere. The deep biosphere contains like 95% of Earth's undiscovered bacteria, undiscovered viral, undiscovered fungal. And that takes us into our quote unquote junk DNA too, and that whole ISIS thesis thing. So good food for thought. Great comment, Catherine. Thank you. Oh, wow. Sorry, buddy. I'm way behind on. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's true. True. It's very true. You know, and who was it? Was it Dr. Graves Boyd Graves, that back in the 90s was coming over here and said he had the cure for HIV and maybe Ebola too, and he died on the way over here? And there's Dr. Sebi. He got taken out, right? Personally, Catherine, I was a fan of Dr. Delbert Blair. I wish, I was just a year short of getting to meet him. If I would have come forward maybe a year before I did, I would have probably met him. He dealt with some people that I had, the melanin dominant contactee conferences I dealt with, the people that threw those knew him. And I would have wished, because for years I knew about him. I only knew him as far as elixirs, I'm sorry. And some of the health things, he was kind of like Dr. Sebi, I thought. Then I found out later that Dr. Blair was a contactee, a big one. So, and the man was just brilliant. Anyway, I think he doesn't ever get enough acknowledgement. You know what I mean? Ascend of the Phoenix, thank you for being here. I didn't see you earlier. Follow Atkins diet. Uh-oh. She just went over my head on that. Is that the cow diet or something? I don't even know, man. Is that the bovine diet? You got me on that one. I don't want to sound, I don't look like an idiot. Cool running, bathed in the blood of cow. Oof. They absorb nutrients through their skin. Yeah, if you read that article there, they're not saying that. They're saying that actually the skin is used for secretion, okay, of waste product, and that they would have to take in their nutrients through the mouth, but it would have to be liquid. So I don't know. I don't know about them absorbing through the skin. That's something I've heard before. But if you look at the analysis, what that individual says, they're disagreeing with that. I'm just saying. So it's food for thought. Maybe it's another type of them that do take it in through the skin, though. But whatever particular type that they're working on there, I don't think it does, because it's even secretion, the ammonia of sweat. It's quite interesting, I wondered how much it has to do with it, to be quite honest. How much it has to do with that, and how much it has to do with the chimeras that they're making in these underground laboratories. And is that where that anatomical alien came from? So that's a really good question. Really good question. That's a good question. What's up, Urso? I would agree with that too. Yep, put out some truth and then muddy the waters so everybody can't tell. Kind of like that guy on Jessica's show a couple weeks ago was saying he's seen real pictures of real Sasquatch. He knew they were real, and just a couple of them, but they just got mixed in. He said those pictures got attacked harder than anything else. So yeah, that's what they do. Put out a truth and squeeze it between a few lies. one of those big sandwiches, man. Oh, thank you for being here, Catherine. I appreciate it. Please tell Charlie I said what's up. And I'll keep referring. Sorry I missed the last couple of groups. Since my dad passed, kind of really tied up on Thursdays the last few weeks, but I plan on making it back, and I apologize to the group for not being there. It's a really nice group. It's called Experiencers of Color, I believe, and it's through the John Mack Institute. Yeah, live stream it for me, man. Definitely. In fact, I've always personally, I think of all the superpowers that would probably be the coolest is the way Kal-El just flies. You got the way that Christopher Reeve did it. It was like he was on the way it was all like he was dancing kind of. And now you got more the way it would look. That cat takes off supersonic. I think that would be a great ability to have, or maybe just go invisible at will. That would be a good one too. You could get away with a whole lot. Or maybe the Twilight Zone I was watching, man. Burgess Meredith, I think it was. He had the clock, the stopwatch. He pressed it and everything would just stop. And he dropped it and broke. Everything was stopped. I think it was Burgess Meredith. I could be mistaken because they just had a Rocky marathon on. And, like a true 80s cat, but like I sat there and watched almost every one of them. Just, God, jeez, man. I always have to deal with how Apollo Creed got murdered in a round and a half. He's supposed to be Ali, and he only went a round and a half because he danced himself out to James Brown. So my cousin was texting me, "You're right, man. Rocky did tell him before the deal, don't wear yourself out before you go up there." I said, "I told you." He told him, man. That's exactly what brother did. He danced himself out, coming to America. He got in there and got wiped in like two punches, killed. Sorry, I gotta watch it. People get mad at me for my Rocky references, and they get even more mad for my Star Wars references. So I got to be careful, man. People say it's because you like Star Wars more than Star Trek. Yeah, technically, but or Star Trek more than Star Wars. That's true, but I like both. It's science fiction, you know what I mean? But the truth is true. Ben Kenobi was a liar. Tell me he wasn't. He lied to that dude the very first movie. We saw an old man. He was lying. I said, "Man, how's your father's lightsaber? He wanted you to have it, but your uncle didn't want you to follow in his ways." You should have said, "No, man, that was your father's lightsaber. I just changed the crystal in it to make it blue again, but I took it from your dad when I cut off his arms and legs and left him to burn to death in an acid pit. And hey, by the way, he took that thing and unlived a bunch of younglings on holy ground, something the immortals from Highlander would never do." You know what I mean? So there's just little stuff like that, but you know. Let me see here if I can find it. No, I can't find it. Damn, that would have been a good one. It's a Star Wars meme, and it's got Ben Kenobi, Little Yoda, and then Anakin Skywalker, but not the old one, like the young guy, Hayden Christian, whatever his name is. He's standing there, and then you got all those kids that were in the temple sitting over there going, "What's he doing here?" And looking at all puzzled. Sorry, I better quit while I'm ahead, man. Oh, it's so messy. Somebody get mad over there, man. Oh. Oh. Oh, right on, Jessica. Thanks for staying too. Yeah, me either. Me either. Not that I can remember, you know. Really? That's interesting. Wow. I've heard of stuff like that. Yeah, and I have known somebody who was a Goju-Ryu expert. He used to break bricks. And just even the kung fu Sifus that I knew, Ned and Ted Chan. From that Chisaw, their forearms were so strong. You even do a little Chisaw with them, you're like, God dang, man. It's like, I mean, you might as well do it with steel. You know what I mean? So I know what you mean. And those cats were little, they were small. Ned and Ted were both Ned and Ted were actually kung fu experts, and like they specialized in Goju-Ryu and like Wang Chung and Eagle Claw, I think it was, but they knew a lot of the styles and stuff. They were really cool cats, and they were really into the movies, and we became friends because they came out, and I'd heard a rumor that they didn't like the movies from the 80s. There was two of them starring a dude named James Ryan, and the first one was called Kill and Kill Again. Another was Kill or Be Killed. He played Steve Chase, like 5-time world champion. And those cats, man, the Sifus did not like Steve Chase. I tell you, it came out when I first met him. They came over and I said, "Hey, man," I said, "Come here." He said, "What is it?" I said, "Man, Steve Chase was a bad mother." "Oh no, Barry, no, Steve Chase, no Steve." It's funny as hell, man. They said Steve Chase only got popular in the 80s because Bruce was dead. I said, or unalive, I'm sorry. I said, I can't argue that, but I was like mashing it up with them. But they were super cool as far as the type of forms that they knew. The advanced kung fu they knew was a whole nother level. You know, Muzak cats dealing with no belts or nothing like that. Whole other thing going on. They were from China though. But hey, what's happening? What's happening? Sorry. Oh, I'm way away. I'm way out comments. I'm sorry. Liquid. I've heard that happen before. I have heard of that. In fact, the guy that had the one guy had the liquid and then the like little waffle things. Yeah, that can happen. That can happen. I've seen some craft. I've seen a craft that I'm pretty sure reproduces in its belly because the entry point at the bottom of this craft was bigger than the room than the what appeared to be in the sky. Okay, and I've shown that room before. It uh, here it is. All right, Catherine. It was this room here. Now, when I actually came into this craft, all right, this craft looked like it was maybe 150 feet, a circular craft on the outside. And when I get pulled in by this beam into the underbelly of this thing, I'm in this room. And this room, she did fairly good representing it as far as it had these organic walls that looked like they were, some type of a mycelium. But unlike mushrooms you see here are like toadstools that are soft, the walls had a hard consistency to them. And I'd touched them, you know what I mean? So I know they weren't soft, but they looked like they would be. Anyway, point being, this room, the one thing that this doesn't represent good, Catherine, is that this room was huge. Okay, I called it like a cargo bay or I thought maybe it was an anti-gravity room. There was this big blue beam in the back, like this cylinder, and it's got this blue stuff moving in it. And I wondered what it was. They're putting things in my head. The ship, I know now it's the ship doing it, communicating with me, opposed to any beams. But it's telling me things like I was getting okay, what was it now? Like uranium, magnesium, and what was the other one? Was it orgone? But it was a combination of things that took me, when I started looking it up, taking me into like certain types of plutonium that are non-radioactive. What they call it, gray plutonium or something weird it took me into. And that's what had me asking people if they were like, what kind of beam brought them in? Because at one point the beam that pulled me in was blue. So I wondered if it was some type of a sterilization deal and maybe a power source as well. But this thing was big. Okay, it was a big beam back there, container. And then on the side was this box. I've seen other black boxes. Okay. And honestly, the only way I could have her represent this, I know that they were carbon tubes that kind of looked like they were coming out of this organic wall holding this thing up. And there were these beams connecting to the side wall and to the top. And this thing, the way it was tilted, I mean, I'm not very good with angles, but God, it looked like it was like a 2 o'clock angle. And it made me dizzy. The closer I got to that box, the more sick I got. Okay. And again, they're telling me inertial dampener is what I was getting when I was even thinking about what this thing might be doing, And so I know that it was, I think, the one thing in that room that was temporally displaced at a phase from the rest of the craft, I think. And that's why I was getting so sick around it. In fact, it was around that thing when I first started feeling the sickness. But this thing is huge. It's big. That was like be a little spot down there. This was a big room. But I believe I'm showing you this because I believe that this is also a room that could be used to birth other craft. Biological reproduction on top of the manifestation consciously of several different races. That's what I believe this was. Now, did I see a ship growing in there? No, I did not. But I get the impression that that's what that room was for. And by the very same token, just as a matter of fact, if they wanted to, quote unquote, take somebody with their car or with their bus, they could beam it into that room. They could pull them in that room. It's big enough to contain a huge several cars, okay, buses, whatever. It was a big room. And I tripped out because it was way bigger. That room itself was bigger than what I saw in the sky. That takes us into a whole trans-dimensional things and how the inside and outside of the craft are not in the same dimension. That's not just Doctor Who bullshit. Excuse me, Doctor Who crap. You know, something to that. Anyway, sorry, I start going on these little tangents and talking too much. Yep, definitely. Greetings, Karen. Oh, right on. Oh, Charlie? Oh, definitely. I love the work he's doing. Really nice brother, too. I like what you guys are doing. Knob, stop, 5 comparable. I mean, if you want to stretch it from just the fact that you have Africans that stay near the equator, and that's why they become that melanin dominant like that, and the U melanin gets that deep. I guess you could say that, you know. But sometimes I wonder how much we embellish melanin. You know what I mean? And things like melanin and the mole theory, but how much we start really embellishing. But that's a possibility, you know. But I mean, at the point, if you're actually going that close to a sun, you're going to have, even though the sun is representing plasma in the glow phase, it still does, I think, have some amount of heat. You know, most of the heat, I do believe, comes in the wave particle form as it travels to Earth. But I do not believe the sun is completely cold fusion by any stretch. So I think that the shielding you would need to have, unless you were a being that could physically access the black holes of the sun, which are, I believe, the cold spots. And the more I look at the Soho website and the stuff they would have in the archives, seeing those cubes and those spears and things that seem to be hanging around the dark spots of the sun, that makes me think that they're definitely not just solar prominences or sunspots, that they're actually portals. And we start dealing with those type 3 civilizations that actually use the Mako, the space of the Mako itself as a power source. Whole nother thing going on. They could use that very easily. And I've talked before about something that's called the Fermi bubbles, and how the Fermi bubbles are gamma radiation bubbles that are above every galaxy, and how they're all connected. And so we start dealing with beings that might even be on the microscopic level, okay, but they're dealing with something like the beings that I believe sent radiotropic fungus here, which actually uses its melanin to convert gamma radiation into the growth cycle. We start dealing with beings like that that are dealing with the gamma ray. And then that's what the Hulk did, really. The Hulk is supposed to generate, you know, the thing with the Hulk is, where would the energy come from to make him bust like that and to grow like that and shapeshift like that? The energy would have to come from somewhere. They're trying to make it like it comes strictly from the anger and the gamma radiation reaction. That's where that energy comes from. But when dealing with the gamma radiation and beings that would use that as pulsable power source, may even be made of that. When you start dealing with the Fermi bubbles, you have a great intergalactic, extragalactic network for traveling to other places. Boom. You want to go to another galaxy, boom, you're there nearly the speed of thought. When you start dealing with that type of things and like what they call the God, the whole black hole, not I want to say dot hole dot theory, not black dot theory, but it's where you actually it's warp physics where you actually direct hole, sorry, DIRAC hole, and that actually would open up a wormhole in front of the ship, in which the ship would actually pull it to it and go through gravitational waves quickly and almost immediately. So the direct holes, if you come by direct hole theory, warp hole theory, with the Fermi bubbles, you got something else going on. See, but they're not telling us how we can actually, how space might work and how some of these beings go through it. I've mentioned before when I was at the Ascetti Ranch, and the last time I was there, I'm sure the last time I'll ever go there, but it was a worthy experience. But the third year I'm there, they actually show me that the owner of that place has these really expensive infrared goggles. And I put those things on and zoomed them like as good as they would go, or as tight as they would go. And, you know, I started seeing out there past our solar system for sure, these stars going to other stars. I mean, really quick. I watched them going literally from constellation to constellation, just like it was crazy. And, you know, I kept looking, going, what the hell? And people started laughing at me and stuff. And I was like, y'all are laughing, but have you seen this? And they're kind of telling me no, you know, which means they can't, and that's not even just seeing psychically, but seeing information, energy directly from the universe. And I've watched it for a long time, several different quote unquote constellations that far out. I'm pretty sure they're made galaxies that they're going between. Okay. And when I was doing that work with Dr. Shields, I asked him, I said, what was I seeing with those infrared goggles way up there in that high altitude like that, where it's so dark, you know, with that. And he's asked me, he said, Barry, what do you think you were seeing? I said, I think I was seeing what they would call engineering feats of something that would be similar to a Dyson sphere, which I think doesn't always have to be spherical. But point is, structure that is, if it was our solar system, it would be over us and the Neptunian objects and everything, an encasement, okay? And that actually used to actually contain the star and the energy of the star, period, for our civilization. And it really wonderful concept. Even almost Death Star-like, if you think about the way it looked, but bigger, but encompassing a whole solar system. Like I said, I don't think they have to be spherical. That's neither here nor there. But the point being, I think that they were using warp drive, hyperdrive, maybe even Fermi bubbles to go from one galaxy to the other or one constellation to the other. And what we're seeing is, although once they make the jump into hyperspace, they're still leaving some type of a trail here in the third dimensional that we can see. That's what I thought I was seeing. And you know what I told Dr. Shields that? You know what his response was? He said, Barry, I think you were seeing exactly what you think you were seeing. And he didn't say it in a way that was mocking or anything like that. So, and again, neither here nor there. Sorry, I get on these weird tangents when people ask me questions. I probably didn't even answer the question you asked. I apologize. As my mom would say, you know, sometimes could be a windbag. Yeah, it's an interesting concept. Really interesting. You know, Star Trek tried to bring that concept out when they were dealing with when Scotty came back in Star Trek Next Generation. Scotty from the original series came back, and he was on there because one of these Federation ships had crashed into a Dyson sphere. That was an interesting episode, actually. Whoa, I'm messing up the chat thing. I'm sorry, y'all. Ooh, golly. Once it gets down that little blue thing, it's hard to manipulate it. Oh, there you go. Didn't have contact lenses on. Hold on. Oh, here we go. Check this out. This is what I wouldn't have thought to show if you hadn't said that. You know what's interesting is they say that this is one of the ones from Zeta, another type from Zeta. Like I said, I really don't know, but what you just said makes me think of this one. Some kind of gray from Zeta Reticuli. I don't know if it's a hybrid or what. And something always catches my attention, the ones that have like veins or stuff like that in their head, you know, due to the experience I had with Mana, which was different. It looked like brain coral on Mana, but stuff like that always just attracts me. But there we have somewhat big old eyes, 3 times human eye size. But to me, that somewhat looks similar to the being that's on that table. You know, I don't know. Does that look anything like what you saw? Thanks for sharing that or for saying that. Wow. See, that's what's cool, man. A lot of contactees come these little groups I do. That is awesome, man. See if I've got another one real quick. I'm curious too, what color were their eyes also? Were they blue or were they gray, or what color were their eyes, the ones you saw? Thought I had another really good representation. Man, sorry, that may have been the other one. Sometimes I got so many of these damn pictures I can't find them all. That was, I had another one, something was being another type of gray that didn't have lenses on with these almost human type eyes, but I can't find it. Anyway, but yeah, thanks for sharing that. Wow. Very interesting. Hi, Clippy. Thank you. Star Trek. Oh, yeah. Silver Surfer, huh? Lawrence Fishburne as the voice. You know, some things about the new Marvel movies, I'm not liking how they're portraying the Hulk kind of. It's not like it was in the comic books. It's getting a little weird, you know what I mean? But I guess we got to take the rough with the smooth. Boy, I can't seem to keep messing up this. See if I can get all the way down. Oh, sorry, I just screwed that up. Oh, okay, I got somebody up there. Hey, oh, right on. Oh, here it is. Hi, Clippy. Okay. Their eyes look human, but a few times larger. Blue-green eyes. So it looked more like the picture I showed earlier with Michael, or what name's picture? Uh, so it looked more like this one then. That blue-green eyes. That's one of the things I found interesting, just that's the way this gentleman described this thing as popping out. It had a very, very blue eye. Again, that's that deal there. The one on the left with the big blue eye. I thought that was really interesting to hear that. You know what I mean? It's little things that we hear in other people's experiences that sometimes ring bells or just catch attention. So was the one you saw with his eye similar to that, but it looked more like the one on the table in the alien autopsy? That's very interesting, you know. And the question, do you think it was a crypto-terrestrial? Do you think it was from Zeta? Do you think it was, or do you even know? I mean, just good food for thought. You know what I mean? I'm just curious. As I said, I'm no expert on these beings. I've not encountered them. So I'm just, for me, I'm just learning from you. Wow. Fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. I'll tell you, it was pitiful how he just beat the hell out of the Hulk, man. He just smashed Hulk. He smashed Hulk so bad he would have come out like that whole movie, wouldn't he? Yeah. The Infinity Stones concept was very interesting, though. Not bad writing there at all. I think my favorite part of that was maybe when it was Captain America and Iron Man in there. He told him, he said, man, put on the suit. He said, anything about you came out of a bottle. He said, well, man, let's see about that. Once you put on that suit, let's go a couple rounds. And dude said, he said, put on that suit. I thought that was great, man. Oh, I understand. Wow. A lot of people in here that have experienced grays. Thank you for sharing that, Timmer 3023. Wow. See, that's the whole reason I came forward, to be able to talk to other people that have had experiences. That's really where it's at. I think it's a time in our history where we can actually do that too. Oh, God, I keep messing that up. Yeah, he got smashed, man. I mean, he got smashed so quick. I was like, man, all I can say is, hey, that would never have happened to Lou Ferrigno. that, of course, wasn't a good representative of Hulk either. It's just a childhood favorite. You know what I mean? He could get shot by bullets and killed. I didn't like that part. And as meeting Lou Ferrigno in person, I was a little disappointed. He was maybe 6'2". I always saw him billed as 6'5". That dude is not 6'5", but he still looks in good shape for that age. But he's like I have brothers at 6'5", 6'6". I thought he'd be around their height. Nowhere near. He's like more than my dad's height. I think he's shorter than my dad. My dad was 6'3", little 6'3" and a half, maybe 6'3" and a half. And I'd say Lou Ferrigno looked about an inch shorter than my dad. He put him at 6'2". But it was still neat to meet him. You know what I mean? One thing I'll say, he looked much more like a soprano in person than he did the Hulk. Yeah, I was kind of crushed. I was like, damn, they need to get just smashed like that? I mean, he got crushed, man. He was all right. He wasn't as nice as the other people that were there, kind of the other people that were a little. He wasn't that nice. Sergeant, I mean, he wasn't bad, but Sergeant Slaughter, I thought he was kind of a dick. Actually, that's the only one, Sergeant Slaughter. But I heard William Shatner was the worst to ever come, and they say he was charging like 160 for his pictures. But they say he was mean as hell, man. Disappointed. Still disappointed in the William Shatner. If you go on YouTube and look up William effing Shatner and putting Will Wheaton, he tells a story about William Shatner that really was a turnoff, man. He dogged Will Wheaton out, man, when he's working at the TNG. Their trailers were next to the Star Trek movie, and he went in there and met William Shatner. William dogged him out pretty hard, man. And that's a good story. Type that in YouTube. William effing Shatner. That's really what it says. William effing Shatner and Will Wheaton. It's kind of an interesting story, you know. And Gene Roddenberry's response to it all is even more interesting. Yeah, that sucks. I'll tell you, because here's the deal. I'm one of the brothers. I go in there. I just want to look at the people, maybe walk by and say hi. Sorry, I'm not going to spend $50 to sit up there and go like that and take a picture with these people most of the time. The way I almost did it with Flash Gordon. Almost. I was close, but he was just talking to me, so I didn't need to. You know what I mean? Gil Gerard, super nice. The dead Buck Rogers that passed away. Little Tweaky, he was cool. Flash Gordon, Sam J. Jones was cool. Heather Thomas, the Fall Guy, she walked by me and said, she almost walked into me and walked by and started just talking to me for a second and walked on. She was nice. And, actually, not too much. I don't know, she may look a little different now. It's been 3 years ago, but she didn't seem to be too plastic either. She looked all right, but she was nice, though. Sybil Danning spoke to me. She looks a little dried up now, though. She was the 80s chick. Dirk Benedict, I didn't talk to him. and the old Captain America, the older guy. Didn't talk to him either. But they all seemed fairly nice. You know, nobody outside of William Shatner and Sergeant Slaughter. I haven't seen any real jerks at the Comic Cons. You know, yeah, at least not there. But I don't know. I'm not an expert either. Um, I met one Doctor Who too, Colin Baker, the only one that got like fired. But I met him. He was fairly nice. He wasn't bad. Him and Perry. What's her real name? Played Perry. Nicola Bryant. She's interesting. You know, I was shocked because when she's talking, I was like, wow, she's got a heavy English accent. I always thought she was American. She had a pretty good accent, you know. Anyway, that'd be most of them I met at the Comic Cons, I believe. But they're always just fun to go check out. You got such a different breed at all those Comic Cons. It's unreal. So. Ooh. That's cool. You know, and I'd like to hear much more when it comes to melanin dominant beings. We didn't hear about the different types. So I've done a few videos on them now. You know, no one talks about the brothers that came from Triangulum, the Triangulum galaxy, and you dealing with brothers that were 25 feet tall or taller. Okay. And no one talks about that. No one talks about them. Are they possibly, and we start dealing, that goes into also the mantis hybrid beings that are the black praying mantis that we never really hear about. Um, Here, where we're touching on that real quick. Oh, uh, double. Okay, sorry. And this is one of those books that I'm not even sure if it's still in print. Double Trip by Daniel Kell. And he had a couple of illustrations. And I'd heard people talking about this, but I'd not seen an illustration until he actually had given one. And that's these brothers that are these praying mantis hybrids from uh, the praying mantis, the black praying mantis that probably come from dark matter. Okay, and that they have these triangles on their foreheads, and that they can do all sort. They're the ones that can bilocate or teleport. So they're the ones similar that Corey had talked about. That suddenly he was calling the Zulu, which he didn't call him that when I met him at first, but that's neither here nor there. And then also Matthew Morning, him and I did an episode of Journey to Truth, and he's somebody that had encountered melanin dominant extraterrestrial. He described a being somewhat similar to this that teleported into him as smoke and then materialized, interacted, and dematerialized. And, you know, that takes us into the whole thing about how, you know, vampires were supposed to be able to turn into smoke also. And how you caught a vampire was by the bottled vampires, catch them in a bottle, put blood in a bottle, they go into the bottle and catch them in the bottle. Matt Delf talked about that. I even did a video over it. Anyway, that's not what I don't think these beings are, but just makes you think of those that are capable of teleporting as smoke. It's very interesting. So anyway, and I've heard about different types of these beings, some that are maybe different, but a lot of them tend to have some type of a triangle on their foreheads. There's another type that I heard about that are probably around 7 feet tall on average, and they dress more like Moors. And when you meet them, they have a dance that they do. It's just they have an extra joint in their elbow, extra joint in their leg, like these mantis. they can move in a way, and in their neck, they can move a way that we can't. And the dance that they do is so intrinsic and so mesmerizing that people just start naturally trying to do it. And they're like dance when you first meet them, they're like dance in front of you for like 30 minutes. It's their way of saying hello. It's a meeting ritual. So I find that very fascinating and stuff like that, but we don't hear enough about that. You know what I mean? We don't hear about the melanin dominant Pleiadians that came here, that the Aboriginals say that put them here. Okay, that they look just like them, and we start dealing with that. And I'm gonna probably, if I can get my friend to come on, I'm going to do an episode about melanin dominant mermaids. There's been a lot of mermaids being seen that are jet black. We say that, I mean like Vanta black, as the material Vanta black, extremely, extremely melanin dominant to another degree. I'm getting very curious about that. I'm hearing a lot of reports about that, like around Maine and New England right now. So stuff like that, I'm gonna try to talk to my friend about and bring her on if I can. Anyway, just food for thought on that. Let's see. Since we're talking about Daniel Kell, I'm gonna show another illustration of his. This is from Double Trip also. That happened to him. Transferring mounts and mounts of data for later download. And it does happen sometimes. You get in the biofield of some of these beings, non-human or humanoid even, they give you this amazing, what people call a download, a transfer of information immediately. And it can take hypnosis or even days to just to decode it all. In terms of, it's just so fast, the transmission. So we have to slow ourselves down a lot to actually retain what it is. And sometimes there's a time lapse. You're in the presence of one of these beings in their biofield, you get this information. And then when they step around and you're not in their biofield, you forget what happened. Like, what happened? You were just in the presence of somebody and something happened, but it starts fading away the further you get away from the event horizon of meeting this being when you're not in their biofield. I've talked about that. I've seen, that's one thing that Bashar talked about that caught my attention because I know it's real. I've experienced it. And then also even Doctor Who, somebody writes Doctor Who, they made those beings called the Silence. They have that because I wondered if these beings like this, especially the humanoids that are capable of this, is it a natural byproduct of their biofield and their vibration being faster than us? Or is it a defense mechanism also? A defense mechanism within their biofield that's deliberate? I don't know, but it's good food for thought. Real quick. Here's another Daniel Kell double trip picture that is interesting. This one isn't melanin dominant, but I believe he said it was from the same. It was with the mantis hybrids, friendly ET. But what catches my attention again, we're dealing with a very large eye. That's why I thought I'd show it. I've seen other, pictures of quote unquote hybrids that are really big eyes like that too. And one last one with Kell that's just worth showing. I think is really worth showing actually. He says that this was the engine on board the craft he was on board. The engine looked like this. And when we start dealing with time control technology, there's even that, there's a patent for a teleportation patent. and one is some of the older ones, and it looks like these two almost beings similar to that, but they look like they might be rock formations. And it's something between these two is like some sort of a field that is not just dimensional, but time field in between them. But it allows for teleportation, these two monolith things. So yeah, so it's just, just food for thought on that. And some of this, I think, kind of ties into some of the stuff that Elizabeth Hayes was talking about in Initiation. And we start dealing with the beings that came here way, way before that we don't hear about that are melanin dominant. So just food for thought on that. All right. Interesting. I don't know. Good question. But I do think they might come from another dimension. When we start dealing with the natural portals of Earth, not just being on the ground, but being up in the air, like John Dover was talking about at that Mesa place. Also, when dealing in the sea, the deeper in the sea you get, I think the density, volume, contraction, and expansion, I think you're dealing with something all different with natural portals and how many of these higher civilizations can use ships or just naturally come through them. So I think that I just have suspicion that the melanin dominant mermaids, the really really dark ones, might come from somewhere else. I could be wrong though, you know what I mean? But sometimes we think, what are dimensional beings from another sea like? Right on, right on. Welcome, Susan. Thank you for being here. Everybody, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. I got to sign off. I've got a client here in a little bit. I'm still doing sessions. I've been scheduling people. Please reach out at barrylittleton13@gmail.com. I'll be happy to schedule you. I've got 2 people I got to reply to today, so this is a good day. Put it in. I'll be hitting you back up today. Thank you all for being here, for participating. I hope this information was relevant. As I sign off here, I'll put that link again one more time to everything we were talking about here for you all want to check it out, and I'll try to put it into the other one outside too, so or outside the box after this thing is recorded and stuff on YouTube. So thank you all for being here. I hope this was good and relevant. I will see you next week. I'm trying to start doing shows on Friday at 3:00 also. I'm gonna see how that works out. If some people show up, maybe not. It might not be a good time slot. I don't know. So I'm going to keep with Sunday 3:00 here, but I'm going to go with Friday 3:00 and just try to chop it up. Talk about some cool, interesting stuff if I find any. Anyway, much love and peace.